Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. How are you today? But before that, I'm Miss Indriana Putri Marianingrum and welcome to my class. Today, I will give you the material about narrative text. Okay class, are you ready for class today? Let's get into our material, the narrative text. What is the narrative text? Do you know narrative text? Narrative text is a type of the text that tell a chronological story in the past. It is the story with complication of problematic event and it goes to find the resolution to solve the problem. And the narrative text tell imaginative story or may be the real story but it was modified. And the purpose of narrative text is to entertain the readers with an interesting story. Then, what are the types of narrative text? Maybe most of you actually already know the story or narrative text that you often read or listen, but are you already know what the types of story that you have reading and listen it in a narrative text? Okay, let's discuss about the types or genre in the narrative text. The first genre in the narrative text is fable. Fable are stories that tell about animals that can talk. For example, the ant and the grasshopper. Or what many of you must already know, maybe the story of the turtle and the rabbit. Okay, the second genre is myth. Myths is story that have developed a lot in society and are generally considered to be factual story or actually in happen. So, myths are often told by your grandmother, maybe or your parents, as usually leave behind a culture that is believed to this uh, until now. So it starts that the myth is considered to have really happened. An example is the story of myth is the story of Nyiroro. You must be familiar about the Nyiroro story, right? Alright, the third genre is legend. Legend is a folk tale that tells the origin of a place. There are usually well-known places and it is believed that there are origin or story behind the formation of this place, and I'm sure one of them is sure that it's really happened. And have you heard even this place? The example of legend is the Toba Lake, the story of Toba Lake, or maybe if you hear is the story of Prambanan Temple. Okay, next is folktale. Folktale is story told from generation to generation, so that is become part of the community tradition. Well, because has become a community tradition, it's believed that the story is really happened in the past. Sometimes if it haven't made into a mind. For example, you must often hear this word. Don't be disobedient to your parent. Later you will be cursed to turn you with a stone. So what's the story in the folk tale? Namely the story of Malin Kundang and the story of Timun Mas. This is the example of folk tale. Okay, the next genre is fairy tale, which is a children's story which contain element of magic or the impossibility of the character. And at the end of the story usually contain a moral message. Example is fairy tale is the ghost and the golden egg. Then the next genre is love story. Love story is story that rise in the themes of the character struggle to get the love of the main character, such as the story of Romeo and Juliet. So you must be very familiar with their story, right? Their love story. But besides some of the genre that I have just explained before, there are also other genre like a scientific genre and then horror genre and history and slice of life, and that can be a personal experience. Okay, then how do you write the narrative text? How we can rate the narrative text? So, in the narrative texts have a structure. And what are the generic structure of the narrative text? The first generic structure of narrative text is orientation. This is the first part of introduce the character, place, and time of the event of the story. Okay, to aid your understanding of the orientation, let's look at the example of orientation video from the story of Timun Mas.
This tale brings us to the mystical island of Java, Indonesia, where a widow named Umbok Sirni lived alone on her farm. The widow was a kindly woman, yet she was overwhelmed by loneliness and longed to have a child by her side. When her loneliness became too much to bear, Umbok Sirni decided to pray to Buto Ijo for help. Buto Ijo was a monstrous ogre who lived on the outskirts of the village and was known to occasionally grant wishes to people. The monster offered to grant Umbok Sirni's wish at a terrible price.
When the child turns 6 years old, you will return her to me to become my meal, he said.
Despite the condition, the desperate woman agreed to his demand. The giant then gave her a single cucumber seed to be planted at her farm. Letting it carefully, Umbok Sirni found a beautiful baby girl inside. Filled with joy, she named the girl Timun Mas.
Well, that is an example of orientation. From the video, it starts that there are characters, namely Buto Ijo and then a mother, also Timun Mas. And there is also seen the incident mentioned at the beginning of the video. The only place where the incident of is located is in Java Island. Okay, next is complication. Complication tells the beginning of the problem until the problem becomes the climax that appears. In in this session, usually involves a lot of the main character to resolve the conflict that arise. Okay, to understand the better, let's watch the example video complication from the story of Timun Mas.
The day finally arrived when the ogre came to Umbok Sirni's house, eager for her to fulfill her promise.
Where is my meal?
For hours, the monster chased after Timun Mas, and Buto Ijo was steadily getting closer. Remembering her mother's advice, she threw the first of the pouches, a bag of cucumber seeds, at the monster. Vines of cucumbers magically sprang forth from the earth, blocking Buto Ijo's path. Suddenly, out burst a powerful torrent of seaweed, forming a giant wave which swept the ogre off his feet.
Okay, that was an example of a complication video. In the beginning, it was Buto Ijo who made a promise to his mother to ask Timun Mas to come back. Then the climax of the story is that the mother uh, breaks her promise and doesn't want to give the Timun Mas back to Buto Ijo. And Timun Mas went and threw the Buto Ijo. Okay, the next is resolution. Resolution is the end of the story of in the from of a solution of the problem occur. The problem can be solved for the better or it can even be worse And this is what will make the story a happy ending or sad ending. Okay, let's see the video of resolution.
Timun Mas had finally stopped Buto Ijo once and for all. Returning to her house, her delighted mother embraced her in her arms, and they both lived out the rest of their days in peace.
Well, that was an example of a video from a resolution where the ending of the Timun Mas story is happy ending, which is Timun Mas managed to fight Buto Ijo until Buto Ijo burned to death. Then Timun Mas was able to return home and live again with her mother, and they live happily. Alright, maybe that's all the material about our narrative text today. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.